This week's tips, guys, is about rips. Rips are currents on beaches that go out to sea, or sometimes a bit sideways. The rips, we could do a whole series just on rips, but we're going to try and cover a couple of the basics. We're here at TurfnSurf in Bundoran, and like any beach with surf on it, it has rips. There's just no two ways about it. If there's waves on a beach, you can be guaranteed there's rips. Other things that cause rips other than waves is like if you have a river emptying onto a beach, or if you have a big tide, like a 4 metre difference in your high tide and your low tide, that can sometimes cause a rip. That happens at places like Ross's Point and Sligo. These big rip tides come in there, and that's where the name comes from. But if you look behind me here, we have the makings of a rip, and this is the reason I wanted to show it to you. They're hard to spot if you're not used to them. The seagull is demonstrating exactly where to be in the rip. And what you can see is, if you actually look around the seagull now, it's actually deep water around the bird at the moment. And if you look beyond it, you can see where the sand has been churned up from the bottom, and it's starting to be pulled out. And what happens is, waves will wash in on the beach, and they'll find the deepest channel, the path of least resistance, if you like. And what they'll do is, they'll start to eat out that channel. And you get this maybe 2, 3, 4 metre wide channel that is a little bit deeper than all the area around it. What happens is a greater volume of water rushes out that channel than does the rest of the beach. If the water just washed in and washed out evenly on the beach, there would be no rips. But what happens is, you get 3, 4, maybe 5 knot currents that are pulling you literally out to sea. Now, it sounds bad, but they're actually quite useful in the context of intermediate and advanced surfing. And a lot of surfers, when they get to know rips and get confident, will actually jump straight into them to get them like a conveyor belt brought out behind where the waves are breaking, and to save on paddling over or paddling out through the waves or over the waves. So this is the start of a rip. It's not really a rip yet, but it's a little deep channel. In this particular case, it's along the cliffs at TurfnSurf, and it's when the waves come in, or when the tide comes in, I should say, in about an hour or two, and that channel is completely covered by water. You won't be able to see it as easy as you do now, but there are some telltale signs. Because the water's moving out to sea, it creates a ripple effect. So the water can be calm either side of it, in between the waves, but you have this little ripple effect, like a river of water running in the opposite direction to what it should be, in other words, out to sea. The other thing is debris. You get sand, you get seaweed, you get bits of sticks, you get the occasional surfer, all sitting in the rip. And you'll find that if they actually just sit in it, you'll see them moving backwards. Now, the thing about a rip is, it's one thing to identify it, it's another thing to B, get out of it, and C, use it as a surfer. So, first things first, you get stuck in a rip, and you realise you're in a rip because you've been pulled out to sea. Don't try and paddle back to shore straight up the rip. It's impossible for a surfer to paddle up a 5-6 knot rip, because you can only really paddle at 4 or 5 knots max yourself, even sprinting, and you can only do that for a couple of seconds. So it's like trying to swim up or paddle up a fast flowing river. It's just not going to work, especially if you're on a small shortboard. You might have some hope if you're on a longboard. So first things first, you've identified the rip, you're sitting in it. What are you going to do? Go with the rip for a start. Stay calm. The only thing that will cause a drowning or cause an accident or cause problems is if you panic. So stay calm at all times. Assess your situation. Okay, I'm in a rip, I'm going out to sea. Go with the rip. When you see that the rip is starting to dissipate and you might be just behind where the white water is breaking, paddle away from, for example, the cliff here, or paddle away from the rip in a perpendicular way. So your rip's bringing you straight out to sea, you're going to paddle left or right along the beach. In the case of TurfnSurf, it's usually be left away from the cliff. In the case of Rossnaula or Strida, it doesn't really matter. So you just have to assess it on the individual beach. So the whole idea of a rip, you get into it, you get stuck in it, you go with it, you paddle to the left or to the right, you find that suddenly you're in what I call open water, and then you literally just catch a wave back in or paddle towards shore. Now, one dangerous combination which you should always be wary of, and it's something we're going to cover in another tip in a couple of weeks, is the wind. surfing is all about the wind. It's a kind of a common misconception that wind doesn't really matter, or that the windier it is, the better. So in the context of rips, be very careful if you have an offshore wind and you also have a rip, because then you're probably in a bit of trouble, because an offshore wind will blow you out to sea and a rip will take you out to sea, and next thing you find yourself 50 meters behind the white water, and you have to battle against the wind, even if you get out of the rip, to get back to the point where you can catch a wave and bodyboard or surf in. So it's very important that if you see on an offshore day, if you see a beach looks rippy, or if you think you're in a rip, it's very important that as soon as the rip brings you out behind the white water, that you're going perpendicular and that you're trying to get back in. If you sit up on your board and you take a rest and you think, oh well, I'm out of the rip, the wind will be blowing you probably only at 2 or 3 knots, but that all adds up. It'll be blowing you out to sea. So one of the most dangerous combinations is a bad rip with strong offshore winds. And when I say strong, I mean 18 to 25 knot offshore winds, not a light breeze like we have today. So on the rip front, don't panic, stay with it, try and identify it, try and identify where it finishes. When you get out behind the white water, paddle to your right or left, and then surf as normal in on the white water, or even just on a green wave if you can. Okay.